Hello, my name is Felisha Shakeer and I'm the Federal Compliance Manager at Park Street Imports. Today, we'll be going over a guide to alcohol beverage formula approvals. In this presentation, we'll cover the following topics: formulas for an alcohol beverage product, why the TTB requires formula approvals, which alcohol beverage products require a formula approval, how to determine if an alcohol beverage product requires a sample for laboratory analysis, responsible parties for complying with formula prerequisites, supporting documents needed when submitting a formula application, and lastly, how long a TTB's formula approval remains valid. What is a formula? There are certain distilled spirits, malt beverages, and wines that require an evaluation of the ingredients and production process by the TTB before the product can be imported and before an industry member can submit labels to the TTB to initiate the COLA process. In some cases, the TTB will also require a sample for laboratory analysis for further review of the product. Two examples of this are imported sake, which will require a sample for laboratory analysis, and another example is distilled spirit specialties or different distilled spirits that contain absinthe type ingredients. An example of this would be wormwood. Wormwood contains thujone properties, which need to have a sample submitted to the TTB for further review. Why the TTB requires formula approvals? TTB formula approval is required to identify if the alcoholic beverage is produced using non-traditional methods or ingredients, verify that the ingredients meet FDA requirements and are considered safe. This is also known as GRAS. GRAS stands for Generally Recognized as Safe and are ingredients governed by the FDA. The TTB will defer to the FDA on ingredients, and if there is an ingredient that is not regulated by the FDA, the TTB will not allow it in the formula. Lastly, a formula approval is required to classify the product for tax and labeling purposes. An example of this would be a carbonated wine and a sparkling wine. These two different class types, although they're similar, have different tax and labeling requirements. How to determine if your alcohol beverage product requires a formula approval. First and foremost, not all alcohol beverage products require a formula approval. An example of this would be a standard vodka that is a minimum of 40% ABV and meets the TTB's definition of a vodka according to 27 CFR 5.22. Another example of a product that will not require a formula is a standard red, white, or rosé wine. However, in order to further determine if your product requires a formula, the best approach here would be to visit the TTB's website for more information. The TTB has a specific site that is called Do I Need a Formula? And from there, you'll be prompted certain questions to further determine if your product truly requires a formula or can go straight to the COLA process. Additionally, it would also let you know that if your product does require a formula, if you have to submit a sample for laboratory analysis. Some examples of products that do require a formula are gin, sake, flavored spirits, distilled spirit specialties, wine specialties, other than standard wine products, and malt beverage specialties. Essentially, if you have a product that is outside of the TTB's definition of what their standard product is, and it seems to be very unique, it will very likely need a formula. Next, let's evaluate the formula application process. The formula application process is divided into two processes. One is a standard online application in which supporting documentation will be uploaded for further review by the TTB. The secondary type is an online application with a sample that is sent to the TTB for laboratory analysis. Laboratory analysis is determined by product type and, in some instances, by ingredient. An example of this would be products that contain absinthe or wormwood. The best way to determine if your product requires laboratory analysis would be to use the TTB's Do I Need a Formula site. From there, once you answer the questions and go through each prompt, you'll be able to determine if your product requires this. In the event that a sample is needed from a foreign producer, a COLA waiver will be needed in order to send the samples to the TTB for laboratory analysis. Next, we'll discuss the supporting documentation for a formula application. In this example here, we have the list of ingredients and the method of manufacture. You can consider this the recipe for the product. The list of ingredients will list all the final ingredients that are used to make the final product, and the method of manufacture will describe the steps in which are needed to create the final product. This document will also contain a final ABV amount and a final batch amount. Please note, it is recommended that if each batch will have varying alcohol content, then it is recommended that it's stated clearly on this document, as this document needs to be exact to the product. So, for example, if it will range from 38% to 40%, this should be stated. However, if each batch is produced in a manner that it will not vary and it will be, for example, only 40%, then this could be clearly stated as well. The next document we'll review here is called a spec sheet. A spec sheet is used for any coloring ingredients, juice concentrates, or extracts produced in-house by the producer. This is a requirement by the TTB to ensure that proper standards are used in the production of each of the ingredients, and helps the TTB to understand that if an ingredient is produced in-house, the methods of which are used to create the ingredient. For example, if you're creating an extract using botanicals, they need to know what ingredients are used to create the extract. For example, are you using a high enough grain neutral spirit plus botanicals, and are you using the proper methods of extraction for the ingredient? The last supporting document we'll review is called a FID sheet. FID stands for Flavor Ingredient Data Sheet. This document is needed for any flavors that are produced by a third-party flavor producer. The flavor producer will be the responsible party for ensuring that this flavor is on file with the TTB prior to being used in the formula that is submitted to the TTB via the importer. In the event that the flavor producer has not gone through this process as yet, an alternative to this ingredient would be to use it in a more pure form, such as if you're using orange, to then use orange juice, orange peel, orange zest, and so on. Overall, it is highly recommended that the producer make sure that the flavor producer has this documentation in place prior to going through the formula process with the importer to avoid any potential delays that can come with it. Lastly, we'll go over TTB formula approval conditions. Once the formula is approved, it is kept confidential with the TTB and will not be released to the public as it is proprietary. This will remain valid for 10 years. The formula approval will contain 2 ID numbers. One is the submission ID, which remains internal with the TTB and the submitter, and the second one is the TTB formula ID, which is linked on the COLA application. The TTB labeling division will then use this information to compare and contrast the formula approval conditions and labeling requirements, and will make sure that the label submitted for review contains the correct verbiage in accordance to the formula approval, labeling requirements, and class and type. After these 10 years, the formula will need to be renewed. Should there be no changes to the formula and the product remains as is, the renewal process can be done via a superseding formula application. This process will ensure that the TTB formula ID remains the same, which will mean that the COLA will also remain the same. This will allow the formula and the COLA to gain an additional 10 years before a new formula will be needed and a subsequent new COLA will be needed to further support the product. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to click that subscribe button. Have a great day.